Hello everyone and welcome to my channel once again. So today we are gonna have a look at the most comprehensive deep dive video guide for bleed builds for Barbarian in Diablo 4. So let's start with the basics, and that is Grandfather versus normal two-hander. Now Grandfather, I'll keep it short, is around 40% to 50% damage loss in Flay build over normal weapon. Why? Because normal weapon, apart from having insane stats and giving us an aspect, has Flay duration. Okay? For bleed builds, the duration of the ability is the most important stat. If you saw my previous videos, like from season 3, you know that, for example, Ring of the Ravenous for Rend is 20% damage increase per second. Okay? And we can get our Flay to like 25 seconds duration, which is insane damage boost. And then of course that like immediately transfers into more damage for our Rupture, because the longer and the higher the bleeds, then obviously the more damage our Rupture does. So even if we could get the same amount of bleeds, let's say we would get to 1 billion per second, well, it's per half a second, so we would get there, but our Flay would be only 5 seconds, then our Rupture would be non-existent compared to the same damage over longer period of time. So that's why Grandfather in Flay build is not good. Now Grandfather, like talking about it, let's also debunk the misconception that a lot of people are spreading around, and that is that Grandfather boosts your crit strike damage additive value. It does not. It has been tested by many people. One of them is Professor Slotmaster. Make sure to subscribe to his channel. He's a great guy, and pretty much for the 3 seasons, everything you have ever learned or other streamer learned is thanks to him and the other people working on all of the tasks. So a huge thanks to all of those guys, to all of those testers doing all the hard work for us. So Grandfather is just a 100% separate multiplier once you crit. So you get your buckets for additives, some other multipliers, etc. And then at the end, if you crit, Grandfather just doubles your damage, which would not be the case, and is not the case, if Grandfather doubled our crit strike damage additive value, because that's a different bucket. And if it double dipped on the additive value as well as the 100% multiplicative increase at the end, Grandfather would basically quadruple our damage, which is nonsense as well. And as I said, was tested in all of previous seasons to not be the case. So this, do not believe in it. Then another thing to have a look at is vulnerable versus crit strike damage, and why when everyone else is stacking crit strike damage, I am running so much vulnerable. Well, it's simple, right? Because again, we have different buckets, right? To have one bucket empty is less damage than having 3 buckets like half full, let's call it, okay? And unlike crit strike damage, vulnerable is actually double dipping. Crit strike damage does nothing for the base damage of Flay or Rend or any bleed ability, right? It does nothing for it. It increases through gushing wounds, but it doesn't boost the base damage of the ability, but vulnerable does. And then it also transfers into multiplicative through hemorrhage board and the legendary node there. So vulnerable is super important, because if our base damage is low, then multiplying 0 by bambillion gives you nothing. It's still gonna be 0, right? So we need enough additives to have the base damage high before we multiply them. So that's why I'm running so high on vulnerable, because basically vulnerable damage and damage while berserking are our only additives, right? And like 1300 total in additives is, I think, like the minimum you want to get. So that's why I am aiming for around 900 vulnerable damage before I dump everything into crit strike damage. So the ratio, like 1 to 2.5, 1 to 3, maybe. And that's even for builds like Bash Bleed, right? Like, again, a lot of people are just running Bash and stacking everything into crit strike damage because they like the huge number that Grandfather shows, right? Even though it's basically a fake number. And yeah, they're losing all of that damage we can get through Hemorrhage. Now for Bash, it's not as visible because Bash actually benefits from crit strike damage to boost its base damage, right? But bleed abilities do not. Still, even Bash bleeds can be further optimized. Now, why am I stacking so much attack speed? Why am I stacking so much crit strike chance in the planner? Well, not on my character because my gear is poop. The reason is simple. Obviously, crit strike chance makes us crit gushing wounds, which then makes use of our crit strike damage. So if our crit strike chance is really low, it should be close to 90%. It's like 85% in the builder. Then crit strike damage loses value, and vulnerable damage obviously gains value, because if you're not critting, then this does nothing for you, but vulnerable is always up. Right? So you should kind of like adjust your vulnerable and crit strike damage based on your crit strike chance. Okay, and now let's have a look at the gear. So obviously, Shaco, we want to triple crit on cooldown reduction. If you get GA, then it's even better, of course. Rage of Harrogat, triple crit on DR bleeding. Again, we want GA there. Hence, attack speed, crit strike chance, crit strike damage, and crit strike damage again, or vulnerable. As I explained, you want to kind of match it according to your crit strike chance and according to the ratio to vulnerable, right? So you have to play with this. If you have too much crit strike damage, go for vulnerable, and vice versa. We definitely want GA on crit strike chance and triple mastery. The aspect is elements. Then on our pants, willpower, which is what you can get only on your druid. So you just make level 1 druid and then reroll to willpower. Resistances to all elements to reach the caps, and then ranks to Flay. Obviously you want to GA that and then triple masterwork it. Tempers, imposing presence. That's what helps us reach 100,000 HP with the perfect gear, obviously. And then chance to stun. On my gloves, I have stun duration, so it kind of is a good synergy. But what you really want on your gloves, or like anywhere, right, is that steel grasp stunned enemies. So, but I couldn't, and I can no longer roll. So this is what I'm, using, and it's obviously not a bad option. Then we have aspect of might, basic skill build. So we have 100% uptime on 20% ER. That's at least what you play here if you're playing Rallying Cry like myself. Even though I have the variation with Iron Skin, which makes you way tankier and is good if your gear is bad, which is pretty much my gear. So I should start using it because it gives us more DR and more healing, right? More survivability. The Rallying Cry, gives us also movement speed, which makes it way faster to clear the dungeon, to clear the pit. And if you have the perfect gear and 100,000 HP, you are already immortal. So I feel like it's a huge loss if you play Iron Skin. But everyone can adjust this however you want. And then obviously you would play Iron Warrior here for the 35% DR from Iron Skin. And Unstoppable, because of course we need that as well. Boots, strength, armor, resistances to all elements. Ideally, both of the resistances to all elements you want to GA. But we can easily make up for that, and if you're pushing really high pits, you probably will, by using instances. So I personally use instances if I'm farming lower pits. At the moment, I can farm T120 in like 8 minutes. Not really worth. I rather farm 114s because that takes around 2.5 to 3 minutes. But even without instances, I don't die. Unless I misplay, right? Like I still have to avoid the boss damage because my HP right now is so low. But other than that, I just don't die. Like the elites don't do anything. So yeah, even if you don't reach the cap, if you're just farming, you don't need to worry about it. Like the incense is only for pushing. And then lucky hit, chance to immobilize. Basically, you just want something that's not stun, because we already have stun on one of our items, then stun on our steel grasp, and here you want either immobilize or freeze. The reason why is that you can proc several lucky hits with one attack, right? So you can actually proc both immobilize and stun, which helps us with stagger on the bosses. But if you get even like crowd control duration increase, like yeah, you don't really go wrong, as in really wrong, like build breaking kind of wrong here. Aspect here is hectic, of course, reduces our cooldown. Then for all of the weapons, oh, and by the way, sorry, I forgot to say, if you have GA strength, obviously you want to triple masterwork the strength here. If you want to reach resistances without instances at all times, then you want to crit the resistances to elements. You can also crit movement speed, which is great to make you simply faster and thus clear faster. So this is really like, yeah, you can't go wrong here unless unless you masterwork armor, because we are reaching the cap without it. And obviously like the lucky hit chance to stun wouldn't be great either. Then all of our weapons, strength, max life. By the way, me not having max life here, I tried some random mace, just equipping it. I went up 10,000 HP, and it was 1900 life mace. So yeah, I'm losing a lot here. So you definitely want strength, life, vulnerable, crit strike damage. This is the same thing everywhere. Again, you need a rogue for that, and you want to hit the ratio. And then Flay duration. Obviously, we want to triple crit Flay duration on all of our weapons. That's the highest damage increase. Aspects are Moonrise on the two-hander, Inner Calm one-hander, Edge Masters one-hander, and then Wanton Rupture two-hander. For our rings, both are the same: attack speed, crit strike chance, again vulnerable crit strike damage, and then Warcry cooldown duration to have really high uptime on that sweet multiplier to our damage, as well as berserking. And the other temper is damage while berserking. This is super min-max build. We are going for precise 300 damage while berserking, so you want this really max out, or at least really high. Like if we lose 1% on blood rage, let's be honest, who cares? Like all of the other multipliers in the game are stronger at this point because they nerfed it, in my opinion, a bit too much, but it was OP before. So yeah. And then the aspects are Rapid and Bold Chieftain. Again, triple shout build, so self-explanatory, I think. And then for our amulet, attack speed, crit strike chance, and cut to the bone, because we can get 7 ranks to cut to the bone. 35% multiplicative damage increase. Absolutely insane. Like the most important thing on your amulet, together with crit strike chance. Is this game kidding me? What is this? What is this troll? I forgot to move or what? Well, I do always say no cuts, no mask on. So yeah, you will just see this. You will just see this awful fail. Where were we? Okay. So back to the amulet, right? The cut to the bone, crit strike chance, and another imposing presence. I only have 2 points here. If I got 3 points plus the life on my weapon here, I would already be like a good 80,000 HP. Like a good 80,000 HP. 3 buffs. pre-commanding shout, pre 15% elixir that you can get from the quest, like 80,000 HP just because why not? And the aspect here is adaptability, and the other temper, once again, crit strike damage or vulnerable damage. The gems in our jewelry are diamonds for all resistances. Here, again, you can play with it. You either go for vulnerable or you go for crit strike damage. And then in our armor, of course, we are getting the rubies. Rubies. What even is that? Is it like an illness or something? This is rabies. So yeah, we want rubies in our gear. Then expertise, of course, two-handed axe expertise, multiplicative when the enemies are vulnerable, which is at all times. Now, for our slashing weapon, okay, this is like the PvP tech, okay, this is PvP tech. I'm glad that before anyone found out, I managed to snatch this beauty for like absolutely for free. It was like 30 million or something, because no one ever plays Polearms, right? But Polearms are great. They give us non-stop multiplicative damage increase plus lucky hit, which helps us with the stagger, right? Instead of two-handed swords, because two-handed swords give us damage increase when we kill an enemy while using the sword, which some boss fights there are no enemies, right? And the boss is the biggest issue. So Polearms are better there. They also have synergy with damage to injured enemies with our talent tree, which I will explain later. But if you get two-handed sword, don't worry about it. Two-handed swords are still great, and it is way more damage in AoE. So you will lose damage against the boss that has no adds, but most bosses do, so not really a huge loss. Yeah, like don't worry about it. Plus you will get the direct damage turns into bleach. So if you're playing Holy Bolts, yeah, you don't care about the tournament where it is banned, you can also, instead of elements, use Berserk Gripping here, which then you have like double dip on the bleeding from direct damage if you play two-handed sword. So like Holy Bolts and Berserk Gripping, I would go for swords. I would go for swords. It makes the AoE absolutely bonkers, okay? But other than that, Polearm. Okay, we did that, and then let's look at the skill tree. Of course, all points in Flay, Enhanced Flay, and Battle Flay for more damage. Then we are dumping everything into Imposing Presence to give us as much life as possible. So as you can see, like missing just 1 point here is 6% life lost. And you know, the way the game works is that it doesn't just count all of your percentage and then take your base life and increases it, but they keep stacking on top of each other, right? So yeah, Imposing Presence, max out, 9 ranks, super important. Then I personally love playing with Rallying Cry, Enhanced Rallying Cry for Unstoppable, and then of course Strategic Rallying Cry, because that's 100% uptime on 45. 1 point into Outburst, 1 point in Tough as Nails, because I made a slight change in the Paragon board, which you will see soon, and I added Revenge to get even more DR than we had before, and to also get the multiplicative damage increase when enemies hit you through thorns. Then Commanding Shout for the sweet DR, Enhanced Challenging Shout for more HP. Then Warcry, Enhanced Warcry, and Power Warcry. If you're feeling very tanky already, like very tanky, you can easily take these points out and put them into more Warcry points to get even more multiplicative, right? But normally I'm playing 3 times Booming Voice for the duration, super important. Raid Leader, which gives us insane healing, like the healing is bonkers. That's why we can play Rallying Cry in the first place, right? Because other than that, we would only be able to heal through potions. And 2 points in Guttural Yell for more DR. 3 points aggressive resistance, again a DR, 3 points into Pitfire, and then 3 points in Slaying Strike. This is the synergy between the damage to injured from our polyarms and Slaying Strikes. Once you hit injured against the boss, the damage just skyrockets, right? And because the bosses got like, I don't know, 300 billion damage or whatever, we are actually in the injured, in the execute phase for a long time. So Slaying Strikes is definitely great. But if you don't want to be playing Slaying Strikes, then the easiest thing you can do is once again put all the points into Warcry. Because Warcry, we should aim for 100% uptime. So yeah, that multiplicative from Warcry is up at all times. Then Rupture, Enhanced Rupture, and Warrior's Rupture for that sweet attack speed, and of course to consume all the bleeds. We want really high strength. Around 2000 is what we want to reach to have at least 400 multiplicative to give us that sweet explosion for the AoE damage. Then 1 point into Hamstring to get into Cut to the Bone. Unfortunately, I don't have the amulet, and the amulet will probably be like 10 billion, so I'm never getting that, but yeah. Then 1 point in Steel Grasp, Enhanced Steel Grasp, and Fire Steel Grasp, so we have pretty much 100% uptime on Berserking. Also, the Vulnerable, we have no other application of Vulnerable in AoE, so like spamming, well, not spamming, but refreshing Steel Grasp to make all the enemies in AoE that we fight vulnerable so that they take the increased damage is super important. 1 point in Thick Skin to get into counter-offensive for more multipliers to our damage, then 3 points into Heavy-Handed because we are using our Polearm, and then of course Gushing Wounds for the Paragon Board. And like, I can't stress this enough, the mastery of Paragon Board, even if you like all of your stuff is the same, can literally be 100% damage difference easily, you know, and not just damage, survivability, everything. But you don't have to worry, I did all of that for you. So first board, we are using Exploit, maxing out on it, of course taking all of the HP nodes around. Then we are taking Carnage because we want the sweet attack speed. We are using Martial here, Shout build, so of course Martial, and to boost all of the nodes around, damage while berserking, DR, all of that we want. Here we are taking more damage while berserking as well as the duration. Then we go up, and here we take Bone Breaker. The best board, one of the best boards, one of the two boards that can reach 49 dexterity. So obviously we pump all of it here to our breath to max out on the crit strike damage. Now, if you feel like your damage is more than enough, these points can be moved to more defensives, right? But ideally, this is what we want. Then here we are taking all the extra life. You know, we are always taking all the life, all the DR that we can without sacrificing a single drop of damage. More DR while healthy, it's like an awesome board to get. Then we are going right, we are using the Hemorrhage board because that turns all of our vulnerable into multiplicative. I personally am at 118%, which is more than we could have ever had with Blood Rage in previous seasons. I'm taking all of the additives here because, of course, as I said, we want to boost the damage with additives before we have the multiplicatives, because base damage doing 0 will turn out to be 0. Here I am playing Might, of course, again multiplicative, and it also boosts the nodes around, so I am maxing out on DR against bleeding here. We are at like almost 60% DR against bleeding, and DR is really hard to get with Loot Reborn, so getting as much of it as we can from the Paragon board, super important. Then we go down, playing the Blood Rage node, of course, and this is where I put Revenge. It's super easy to proc. gives us another 8% DR. Okay, so we have 16% DR node here. Easy proccing it thanks to the willpower on our pants, as I explained before. Here we are taking more damage while berserking, and of course the duration, that's also very important, the legendary node itself, and then all of the life here. Then we are going to the right, we are taking the decimator node for, again, another multiplicative damage increase, again taking all of the HP around so that we are super tanky, and then we are using ire here because ire helps us reach the 300 cap, as well as gives us more DR while we are berserking against elites. We are of course also taking this node here for DR vulnerable, and we are taking some extra vulnerable damage here. You can actually change ire with might, but I feel like damage reduction from bleeding is obviously more important than vulnerable, right? Like even enemies from afar, thanks to the thorns, are always bleeding, okay? And sometimes you don't have the uptime on vulnerable, you forget to use your steel grasp, or you just don't, you're just or you miss or whatever. You know, so DR bleeding definitely more value than DR vulnerable. So this is what I went for. And as you can see, we are missing just 36 willpower here. If you're serious about pushing, you are already using instances, so you get free 40 stats there. So even 620 willpower node, we reach, we activate, and get another 4% DR, turning this probably into the most min-maxed board for DR without losing damage ever made. Like, I am super happy about this board. Like, I don't think I can even come up with something better. Like, yeah. So that's pretty much it for the build. I know it was a long video, but I hope that you understand Bleed Barbarian better now. Maybe you will even discover some secrets, like for example when druids or rogues discover that aspect of retribution quadruples their damage, right? Unfortunately, I tested this, it doesn't quadruple our damage, which is a shame, because like can you imagine like just shooting 150 billion rupture? we'd be maxing out on pit already. So thanks for watching, thanks for all of your support, and see you in the next one. Ciao.